How's it going?
Good evening, everyone. I have insufficient light once again, but I am here, so I'm happy for that. It is Friday night. It is time for the bonus hole. Hello, all my excellent friends. I think I'm not adjusted quite right, and I might just have to live with it. I'm rocking the redneck look tonight because I am feeling excessively pregnant. It looks like we're going to have this baby on the 10th or the 11th of October, which is very exciting. I, for one, am thrilled to be done with this. And on to the next difficult phase. Different kind of difficult, as I'm constantly saying. Oh my gosh, my podcasting setup is so ghetto, but here we are. Hello, Whisper. Hello, Jijam. Hello, Martin. I'm very tired, so bear with me while I try to read you guys some of these stories. I did find some interesting stories, and some of them kind of inflammatory, so we're going to get into it. We're going to look at the mayor of Dallas who just converted to GOP, and we're going to talk about Russell Brand being back and what that means. We're going to look at what Scott Adams has to say about young men, because it's kind of an interesting observation and kind of concerning. We're going to talk about what's going on with Dave Portnoy. Never a dull moment with that guy. I don't love him, but he is a very forthright, out there person who is unwilling to be canceled, and I respect him for that for sure. Hello, Jared. And we're going to talk about more migrants going to New York City, and maybe a little bit about the Hunter Biden case, and hopefully also what Josh Hawley is attempting to do to make life a little bit better for Americans. I, for one, love Josh Hawley very much. I think he is a very admirable person. And not even as a politician, he talks a great deal about being a father and the importance of strong, purposeful masculinity and all this other stuff. And I really just respect that when it comes from a guy who's raising his family, who's working for the American people, and who has accomplished great things in his life. So more power to him. We'll see what he has to say. All right, let's start with this story about the mayor of Dallas, whom I do not know, but we are going to learn about him. Mayor Eric Johnson. This is the archived version of the Wall Street Journal's opinion page, which is one of the last kind of really good, kind of conservative place to get information about the world from the mainstream media. I've always respected their opinion page. I'm going to try to scoot over without crushing the dog. She likes to be right beside me, and it's kind of frustrating when I have to get up. I can't sit too long. I can't stand too long. Every time I try to move, there's a dog underfoot. I'm just ready to be done with this. It's all good. But let's go on. Mayor Eric Johnson. America's cities need Republicans, and I am becoming one. Interesting. While Dallas has thrived, elsewhere Democratic policies have exacerbated crime and homelessness. Let's learn more about this story. I have been mayor of Dallas for more than 4 years. During that time, my priority has been to make the city safer, stronger, and more vibrant. Good for him, right? Let me zoom in a little bit. That means saying no to those who want to defund the police. It meant fighting for lower taxes and friendlier business climates. And it meant investing in family-friendly infrastructure such as better parks and trails. Sure, great. Sounds like all things that a mayor should be doing, right? That approach is working. Alone among America's 10 most populous cities, Dallas has brought violent crime down in every major category, including murder year over year for the past 2 years. In a recent Gallup poll asking Americans to rate the safety of their major cities, Dallas came out on top. We have also reduced our property tax rate every year since I took office, signaling to investors that Dallas intends to remain the nation's most pro-business city. Now, at this point, it sounds a little bit like a sales pitch. Maybe he's planning a run for president down the road. Who knows? Doesn't really matter. I will say that property taxes in Texas are insane. From my understanding, they don't have income taxes, but they do have serious property taxes. You can buy a cheap house, but you're going to make up for the difference in price with the taxes. So good on him for focusing in on that for sure. This philosophy has helped attract growing small businesses and several Fortune 500 companies, including Goldman Sachs, the construction engineering firm AECOM, and the global commercial real estate outfit CBRE. After these wins for the people of Dallas, and after securing 98.7% of the vote in my re-election campaign this year, I have no intention of changing my approach to my job, but today I am changing my party affiliation. Next spring, I will be voting in the Republican primary. When my career in elected office ends in 2027, on the inauguration of my successor as mayor, I will leave office as a Republican. I realize this will come as a surprise to many. During the decade I spent serving my hometown in the Texas House of Representatives, I was a Democrat in a Republican-controlled legislation. I prided myself on finding common-sense solutions and working closely with my conservative colleagues to improve policing, public education, and water infrastructure. I was never a favorite of the Democratic caucus, and the feeling was mutual. That's fair. He probably saw the directions that the Democrats were going in and didn't want to move in that direction necessarily, which I have to say good for him, because that was not a good way they were going. Let's see here. I was never a favorite. By the time I was elected mayor, a nonpartisan office in 2019, I was relieved to be free from the hyper-partisanship and ready to focus on solving problems. Good for him. But I don't believe I can stay on the sidelines any longer. I've always tried to be honest and say what I think is right for my city. The future of America's great urban centers depends on the willingness of the nation's mayors to champion law and order and practice fiscal conservatism. He's right about that. Of all the places you can be liberal, fiscality, I guess, money is not one of them where you should be liberal. You should be conservative when it comes to fiscal policy. Our cities desperately need the genuine commitment to these principles as opposed to the inconsistent, poll-driven commitment of many Democrats that's long been a defining characteristic of the GOP. In other words, American cities need Republicans, and Republicans need American cities. When my political hero, Theodore Roosevelt, was born, only 20% of Americans lived in urban areas. By the time he was elected president, that share had doubled to 40%. Today, it stands at 80%. Wow, I did not know that. As America's cities go, so goes America. Unfortunately, many of our cities are in disarray. And this is why you'll hear a lot of people on the right saying things like move out of cities. But when 80% of people live in cities, what are you going to do? It is the most convenient place to live if you work in a city. Completely understand. It is an issue of convenience. It's an issue of paying more for paying more for gas, all this other stuff. It's an issue of commute time. I was raised probably about 10 miles from the city, and for much of my childhood, my dad worked just inside the city, so he would commute about half an hour into the city every day. And then as I grew up, he ended up getting a job further north in the capital of Colorado, and he would commute 2 hours 3 times a week. 2 hours one way, 2 hours the other way to get to work, which he was kind of working from home before it was cool. It was a pretty cool setup. But at the same time, it was like, I said to my parents one time, I was like, I know you guys wanted to live out in the country kind of, but have we paid for the difference in cheapness? Like, have we paid for the difference in having a cheaper house by paying more for commuting? I don't remember what my parents said, but I thought it was a good point. I thought it was a valid point. Even as a young kid, I was like, well, it is inconvenient to live so far from everything. So is it worth it to live further away from the city? Now, as time went on, we ended up getting more stores like Walmart, like grocery stores closer to where we were. And that really helped with that commute stuff. But as far as work goes, I remember when I lived there in 2018, 2019, I was commuting from my parents' house into town, and it was a solid 30 minutes, and I would get up at 5 a.m. so I could be at work at 7, right? So it's not something simple. It's not easy for people to just move out of cities. In many instances, it is much better for them to stay closer to where they work or where they need to be. Sorenko says time is money too. It is, and when you start valuing your time as money, you're going to see things like working from home as being more valuable. And I completely understand that, but I digress. I didn't realize that 80% of people lived in cities. That makes sense to me. Okay, so let's get back to the article. Unfortunately, many of our cities are in disarray. Mayors and other local elected officials have failed to make public safety a priority or to exercise fiscal restraint. Yeah. Most of these local leaders are proud Democrats who view cities as laboratories for liberalism rather than as havens for opportunity and free enterprise. That's true. That's a very good analysis. Too often, local tax dollars are spent on policies that exacerbate homelessness, coddle criminals, and make it harder for ordinary people to make a living. And too many local Democrats insist on virtue signaling, proposing half-baked government programs that aim to solve every single societal ill and on finding new ways to thumb their nose at Republicans at the state or federal level. Enough. This makes for good headlines, but not for safer, stronger, more vibrant cities. He's not wrong about that. And I think next we should read about what's going on in New York City because it's pretty wild. In the coming years, I will continue to pursue my 3-pronged goal for Dallas to become the safest major city in America with the best park system in Texas and the lowest taxes in our fast-growing North Texas region. I think that's great. And if a mayor can accomplish that for his city, I actually don't really care what party he's aligned with, but he's right when he says that these Democratic leaders are choosing to focus on ideological priorities instead of practical stuff that's actually going to help the people who live there. I am city born, raised, and live in a city, but have to live very cautiously daily. The convenience is great, but while you are not elderly, try to live outside of the city and commute for work, says Blue Reader. That's good advice. Baker says, I just want politicians to live by the same standards they set for we the people. Single subject voting should be a thing, and any politician that disagrees needs to be removed from office. Well, I don't know if you're familiar with me, but I am a single issue voter. I am very single issue, and I haven't made up my mind if it's a net positive. It's just that this one issue is extremely important to me. Like, always has been. Super, super, super important. Like, I can't think of anything that is more important on any level, because it speaks, the issue that I'm so strongly attached to speaks so deeply to the moral state of our country, right? So it's not insubstantial. It's a very big deal. For me, of course, it is being pro-life. And to me, whether a country is pro-life determines whether it has strong moral ethics and whether it's going to survive, honestly, as far as I'm concerned. And I'm not being hyperbolic. I think that if you view life wrong, you're going to view people as things. And that's one of the biggest sins you can commit, because people aren't means to an end. People are individuals, and you need to respect that about them. But yeah, I kind of agree. Single issue seems to be the way to go. Hold your local officials accountable and make sure they hear your voice. And I intend to keep the promise I made to Dallas voters in 2019 and refrain from endorsing candidates seeking partisan political office while I'm mayor. This is about promoting policies and principles, not personalities and politicians. Still, with my change in party affiliation, I recognize that the number of Republican mayors leading the nation's 10 largest cities has increased from 0 to 1. This is hardly a red wave, but it is clear that the nation and its cities have reached a time of choosing. And the overwhelming majority of Americans who call our cities home deserve to have real choices, not progressive echo chambers at City Hall. Yeah, there you go. Mr. Johnson, a Republican, is mayor of Dallas. Good for him. I respect it. I believe he is also African American, but I actually don't know. He didn't mention race at all, which honestly, good for him. Let's see if we can find his picture. I'm just curious. Eric Johnson. Let's look it up. Yeah, I think I saw a picture of him earlier. Mayor of Dallas. Yeah, African American. 60th mayor of Dallas, Texas, first elected in June 2019. Re-elected in May 2023 with, 98.7% of the vote, breaking a 114-year-old record of the highest vote percentage garnered by a mayoral candidate facing any opposition in Dallas history. So he is incredibly successful, and he seems like a super smart guy, because now he's looking at the state of his city. He's like, I'm doing great, things are going well, but it's because I'm not a raving Democrat, so I'm going to switch to the other party and see what happens, which I find impressive. I find that honorable, and hopefully he finds much great success moving forward. So I think that's cool. Let's see if there's any negative press on his switch, because I don't think there will be. He's super, super popular. Switching to the Republican Party. Switch parties. Yep, okay. Switching. Yep. Citing homelessness and crime. Switching to GOP. Okay. So it doesn't really look like there's a lot of negative coverage about this, and I hope that this kind of sets a precedent. I hope that other mayors will do the same thing, because it feels like the right thing to do. Now, where you're getting some of the ridiculous red pilling is places like this, and this is why. Migrant buses leave Texas for New York City despite claims the city is full, as siege continues to hit the Big Apple. So this is wild. I don't know if you guys saw that AOC got shouted down when she went to speak to her neighborhood in New York City, and it was because of this kind of thing. People were accusing her of not doing her job properly and of being far too partisan. Now, I personally remain fully in favor of this ridiculous onslaught for New York City, because as we were just reading the other day, they are still finding time to tear down statues and be partisan and talk about reparations. So again, as far as I'm concerned, they do not have enough pressure on them from this migrant crisis. Jared says he sounds too good to be true, but that could just be the cynicism talking from many years of Democrat and Republican treachery we've been experiencing for several years. So he won by 98.67% of the vote. To me, that doesn't sound too good to be true. It sounds a little bit like what DeSantis did in Florida, where even Democrats were agreeing with him. Like, he really brought people together, and everyone was just like, hey, these policies are actually working. Whether I agree with you on a partisan ideological level or not, I cannot disagree with the practical application of how successful your choices have been. So I appreciate that. And that was something that I saw under the Trump administration too. I thought it was great. I was looking around. I was like, oh my gosh, look how great the economy is. Everything's fantastic. And I was like, this is it, right? These are the policies that I thought were so awesome. And now we're trying them on for size and they fit great. And I felt really great about that. I thought that was super cool. And I feel like this is a little bit what's happening in Dallas. And it looks like also what happened in Florida as well. So hopefully we get more of that, and hopefully people start to become a little less partisan as they see the application of some of these good policies. But again, where we're not seeing these good policies is in New York City. They need more immigrants to flood their cities to really feel the pressure that people are feeling, for example, in places like Texas and Arizona. Oh, let's see here. More buses filled with migrants left Texas bound for New York City Friday, despite Governor Kathy Hochul insisting that there is no more room for them. Well, she can insist that all she wants. They said they were a sanctuary city, and now they're going to have to live up to that name, and I think that's fair. Buses chartered from Texas by Texas Governor Greg Abbott as part of his bid to give non-border states a taste of the migrant crisis left from Del Rio and Eagle Pass for the Big Apple as the pipeline of migrants from the border to big cities continues. Statistics published by the Post this week showed 1.23 million migrants have been legally allowed over the border to pursue asylum claims in the last 11 months, according to data analyzed by the Transactional Records Access Clearinghouse, TRAC, a nonprofit at Syracuse University. Now, I'm going to kind of drop this here because that's an interesting note. One of the people I like to follow whose ideas I like, super, super interesting, is Scott Adams. Scott Adams is a truly unique thinker, and he has been able to teach a lot of people how to look at the news in a much more reasonable manner, and I really appreciate that about him. He's very level-headed. Sure, he loses his mind. He's a little bit too arrogant, etc., etc. I take issue with whoever. He has this interesting idea, and I'm going to pitch it to you guys here. If you don't listen to him, you probably should. He has this very interesting theory that the reason that the cartel still exists and still poses a threat to the United States is because, wait for it, the cartel is in league with the American three-letter agencies. And personally, I find that very hard to argue with. I don't know if you guys will as well. I just thought it was the most interesting idea in the world. And I was like, that makes sense. That makes sense because we know that these three-letter agencies have the power to go into other countries and turn them on their heads. We saw them do it in many different countries. The first one that springs to mind for me is Libya. And Muammar Gaddafi. I'll just use his last name, Gaddafi. And Hillary Clinton saying, we came, he saw, he died. We saw, he died. And that to me was so telling of the deep state and of everything that we suspected about these three-letter agencies. And I personally am going to put in my personal recommendation to follow what Scott Adams says and thinks because he's a very smart thinker. And on this point, I think he might be right. And as far as the immigration thing, let's touch on that one more time just because Joe Biden said something patently unforgivable about it. Biden, quote, MAGA Republicans spent 4 years gutting the immigration system under my predecessor. They continue to undermine our border security today. Dip does not approve of this sentiment, and neither do I, because that's one of the most blood pressure raising things I've ever heard. And I say this as someone who's really supposed to be keeping good control of their blood pressure right now. This is not okay. I've been listening to politicians lie my entire life, right? I'm pretty sure that all of us have. But this lie is on another level. Like, I've never heard anything quite this forthright. And it forced me to do a double take. I was like, wow, of course. Crazy stuff. Of course he would say that. Yeah, and then Greg goes on to say, meanwhile, the people on the front lines of the border invasion, and he, quote, tweets Julio Rosas, whom we love and appreciate, who's doing good work down on the border itself, Eagle Pass, Texas Mayor Rolando Salinas, Biden is to blame for the border crisis, and no one from his administration has called us as thousands illegally cross into the city We are here abandoned. Yes, and if you recall, yesterday we were watching Biden administration officials go down and remove the American border from the Rio Grande. That also blew my mind. So this statement from Biden today, I have no mind left to blow. It's really kind of frustrating because he's lying. He knows he's lying. He doesn't care. No one's ever going to call him on it. And I'm constantly brought back to the concept that we have to win in 2024. And you guys get to watch Dip grooming Dot in the background. They're going to start fighting in a minute, and I'll have to switch the camera view because it just looks like they're murdering each other. They're not. They're just sparring. They're just sparring buddies, I promise. They're never going to hurt each other. They haven't hurt each other in the past. They just love to wrestle. It's great. But anyway, I won't distract you with that. We do have to win in 2024 because I cannot handle being lied to by a politician like this, and it cannot continue. I don't know what else to say. Like, this is dismantling our entire country. And there's not really a way around that unless we win a political victory. Now, how we go about doing that, we really need a candidate who wins in a landslide that is undeniable. And from there, we can go on to reform the election system so that, for example, no votes are lost. We don't want to lose anyone's votes, right? We want all the elections to be fair and forthright. And we don't want anything suspicious to happen to anyone moving forward. That would be terrible. And I'm couching this somewhat carefully because we are on YouTube, but we do need that victory in 2024. Otherwise, this will continue and this will get worse. And I don't know about you guys, but that depresses me on a major level. But let's skip to, we have so many different ways we could go. Okay, let's see what Scott Adams was saying about young men, because this is an interesting point. Frog Club is rooting for America. Thank you. I appreciate that. We appreciate the frogs. There's like a zillion of them here in Florida. I'm pretty sure that's what Dot licked the other night that made her so sick. She spent a night at the vet because I'm pretty sure she sampled a frog. Scott Adams says, there is a generation of males coming who will not put up with the BS. And Elon Musk says, good. I was a little bit more reserved. I said, that's a scary place to be. I suspect China is in a similar position, not least because they have such a huge gender imbalance due to their one-child policy. They have far too few females because parents chose, when they found out that they were going to have girls, they chose to either abandon those babies or abort them, because abortion is so great and can be used to implement genocidal plans. And I think I might have slightly been misunderstanding what Scott was saying when I left that comment, although I do think that it's still relevant about China. It's good that there's a generation of young men coming who will not put up with the BS. I think that's great. I think that guys are disagreeable enough that they can put an end to this stuff. But they're going to have to be brave. They're going to have to be forthright, and somebody's going to have to take that first step and make it happen. So I completely understand why Elon Musk is saying good. Absolutely. But when you get a bunch of young men who have nothing to lose, and I'm referring here specifically to families and marriages and all that other stuff, having kids, the importance of that, that is a dangerous situation, because my theory for a really long time as far as China goes has been that I think what China was kind of hoping for with their one-child policy was that they would get a bunch of young men with nothing to lose, and then they could go out and fight all the wars they wanted to. And I still kind of believe that. I do. So we'll see what happens with that. They're not in a really good place economically. They're having a lot of issues. I don't know if you guys recall Evergrande. That was a whole thing that kind of collapsed on them. And it's all fake real estate investments, and they build cities out of nothing and pretend that they're really occupied, and just super shady, just super nonsense over in China. Mr. Proxy says, imagine being well-tempered while posting on Twitter. Twitter does have a tendency to make you crabby, but here we are. You can also have really good conversations. Like, I was going to have us read something from Michael Schellenberger, but then I started scrolling and it's like 15 pages worth. Like, I don't think Elon Musk should have given us the power to write entire novels on Twitter, because that was a long article. And I was like, okay, well, I would like to read it, but there was so many words. I don't think we would get through it for sure. Blue Reader says, too much soy via public education. Yeah, so many things are working against young men. I think it's truly inspiring that so few of them are willing to embrace wokeness, because it's very important that our society have at least a few people out there who will not go along to get along, people who are willing to push back, people who are not okay with being like told that they're evil, told that they're bad, etc., etc. No, you shouldn't have to put up with that. And I do think that guys are the ones to put an end to that. Hopefully, we'll see. As long as we have people telling, Andy says lots of frogs. We have lots of frogs in the chat, which I'm here for. But yes, in Florida, every night when we go out to skate, if there's any amount of moisture, there are like 15 frogs at the skate park, if not more. And then last night there were lizards. So it's very clearly a lizard and frog turf war. So I'm cheering for the frogs, of course. But who knows, maybe they team up on the humans at some point. That's not good. But yeah, so I think that males are going to save our society just like they built it. But again, they need to not listen to people who are telling them that they're not to blame for anything, that they're not responsible for anything. They need to listen to voices like Jordan Peterson. They need to listen to voices like Joe Rogan and Jocko Willink, and people telling them to be strong, and people telling them to be responsible and to take on the challenges of having a family, and not to black pill them on the entire opposite gender, because that's not the way forward. It's just not. Andy says frogs always come out to the skate park to watch us skate at night. It's very true. Mr. Proxy says, for real, your posts have a calming effect. Your stream too. I'm glad my posts do. I'm not always perfectly tempered on Twitter. I do tend to get a little bit spicy, but it is what it is. I'm only human. I try not to call names or anything. Let's talk about disagreeable men. So let's talk first about Russell Brand, and then we'll talk about Dave Portnoy, because they've both been doing interesting things. We're going to listen to Russell talk, because it's only a few minutes long. So it'll be about 3 minutes of him talking, and I'm going to try to make sure you guys can hear it. So,
hello there, you awakening wonders. Obviously, it's been an extraordinary and distressing week, and I thank you very much for your support and for questioning the information that you've been presented with. By now, you're probably aware that the British government have asked big tech platforms to censor our online content, and that some online platforms have complied with that request. What you may not know is that this happens in the context of the Online Safety Bill, which is a piece of UK legislation that grants sweeping surveillance and censorship powers, and it's a law that has already been passed. I also don't imagine you've heard of the Trusted News Initiative. Now, as is often the case when a word like trusted is used as part of an acronym to describe an unelected body, trust is the last thing you should be offering. The Trusted News Initiative is a collaboration between big tech and legacy media organisations to target, control, choke and shut down independent media organisations, like this one. We'll be talking about that on our show on Monday on Rumble. But just to give you an idea of what the TNI is, this is a quote from one of their spokespeople. Because the actual real rivalry now is not between the BBC and CNN globally, it's actually between all trusted news providers and digital platforms. It's clear that these organisations collaborate in constructing narratives, whether that's around the war or the pandemic, and of course there are other examples. And it's very clear to me that we have to be very, very cautious indeed. That's why I'm asking you to follow me on Rumble. Rumble have made a clear commitment to free speech, and Rumble is the primary platform that we will be streaming from. We'll be back this Monday, and as usual, we'll be talking about deep state and corporate collusion, and how ordinary democracy is anathema now, how it's shut down, ignored, and avoided. We'll be talking about a military-industrial complex that is able to facilitate and start wars that seem sometimes to be little more than money laundering operations, and that's with all respect to the hundreds of thousands of victims of the numerous ongoing wars in the world at the moment. We'll be talking about the role of Big Pharma and how Big Pharma have been able to influence government policy around the world, and how they've been able to evade due liability and necessary scrutiny, how they've been able to avoid media investigation that perhaps ought to be due them. And of course, we'll be talking about media corruption and censorship. So please follow me on Rumble, because that's the only way that we can keep our voice. You can go to rb.rumble.com to support me directly and keep me and our channel independent. And I need your support now, more than ever, and more than I ever imagined I would. So follow me, support our channel if you can, if it's within your means. But more important than any of that is that you please, if you can, stay free. Hello there, you're...
Yeah, so I really appreciate Russell at this point, and I have to be honest. it makes very little difference to me whether these accusations against him are true or not, because he seems to me to be pushing an agenda of nothing but truth. And I am one of those people who will follow people and take whatever grain of truth I can from what they have to say. I follow all sorts of thinkers, and I'm just constantly looking for what little bit of truth I can find, what little bit of wisdom. I will take it from the worst places, and I don't really care what other things those people have done. And that can kind of get you into trouble, because then people can easily say, oh, didn't you know this about Russell Brand? Why, yes, I did. I don't care. I think that at least part of the reason any of these allegations came out in the first place against him are because he's doing things like talking about Big Pharma. He's doing things like talking about the military-industrial complex. These things are not popular with what I could probably refer to best as the deep state. And I would include the mainstream media in that because they function effectively as arms of the Democratic Party, which is the functional, concrete foundation of the deep state. Every part of the deep state aligns almost perfectly with the Democratic Party, and I'm not sure if that's cause or effect, but people like Russell Brand are calling for people to think for themselves and to focus on liberty, independence, and not listening to these voices hammering in their ears, telling them the exact same marching orders they're getting from everywhere else. I don't care about these allegations. Absolutely not at the end of the day. I happen to know that everybody is flawed. Everybody makes mistakes. Russell Brand certainly has, and he's actually been exceedingly forthright about his mistakes. I think in his biography he wrote about being super, super promiscuous, and it was kind of a point of pride. That's why he got, for 3 years in a row, Shagger of the Year from whoever was giving that award to him. But then he was on the side of Hollywood, right? He was on the side of all the people who were okay with Big Pharma and who were okay with the military-industrial complex. Now he's not. And he has a big audience. In fact, he opens most of his shows saying, hello, all you awakening, you 6.2 million awakening wonders, because that's how many people were subscribed to his YouTube channel. He has a lot of influence, and a lot of people think he's great. A lot of people think he's funny. In fact, he was at a sold-out show of his when this news first broke, because he's a good comedian, and people think he's great. People think that the way he delivers his message is persuasive, and that's important. So I don't know what's going to happen with him. I do have to say I appreciate his disagreeability. If you guys are not subscribed to his Rumble, you should be. Go look at this on his Twitter, which is at Rusty Rockets. Like, share, subscribe, go over to Rumble. Make sure you're following him there. These are the kind of people we need to take a stand. He, I don't think, is going to be one of those people who backs down, and we 100% need those people in our lives. Mr. Proxy said he's very common sense, to be honest. Yes, he is, which he will be the first to tell you that he was super promiscuous and that he probably made what he considers mistakes. He was addicted to drugs. He went to rehab for all kinds of addictions. And yeah, I don't know, man. I don't know. 16 years old is, in fact, the age of consent in the UK, like it or not. I don't know why he decided to do that, other than the fact that he was a celebrity, and celebrities think they can get away with murder. In some cases, they can. And yeah, everybody was just fine and dandy with him when he was being Shagger of the Year 3 years in a row. And I know we're in the US here, but shagging means banging everything that moves. And that's exactly what he was doing. All the hard drugs, all the addictions. Yeah, so that's his background. Now he's calling out serious issues in the actual world. So, of course, they're going after him for his past. This stuff never seems to matter until you actually do something that might challenge the status quo. Here he is doing just that. Speaking of causing trouble and challenging the status quo, here we have this really interesting story about Dave Portnoy, whom I do not love. He's a little bit woke sometimes. But I highly value the virtue of disagreeability. And I think I've said this before. I'm actually super disagreeable. I probably sound nice, but I am not afraid to I don't know. I'm not afraid to be a little bit ornery, you know? If somebody's going to tell me to do something, I'm probably going to try to do the opposite. And it sounds a little bit childish when I put it that way, but at the end of the day, I think that it keeps you on the right path to be pushing back on all forces who are trying to influence you one way or the other. And that's what Dave's doing. So this is an interesting story. We're going to break it down. Barstool CEO, you guys are familiar with Barstool Sports, huge company. CEO Dave Portnoy cold calls the Washington Post reporter to confront her about the upcoming hit piece on him. So, backstory, if the New York Post doesn't give it to us, I haven't read the first part of this article yet, he was going to do a charity event to raise money for charity, and the Washington Post thought that this would be a good time to call the people who were involved in this charity event and try to slime Dave Portnoy to them. So, let's read. Barstool Sport boss man Dave Portnoy went on the attack against a Washington Post reporter over a feared hit piece after the journalist contacted sponsors of his upcoming pizza festival. Portnoy called reporter Emily Heil, the paper's national food writer, on Wednesday to upbraid her for sending an email that says to the effect, "Dave's a misogynist racist. Do you want to defend yourselves advertising at this event?" So it wasn't the participants, it was the advertisers. And this is what they do, right? This is their MO. They go after your advertisers and they say, "Oh, we saw that you're doing this thing with this guy. It's such a shame, but he's actually like a super racist. Would you like to give us a comment on exactly why you're giving your money and putting your name on what he's doing?" And then if you don't, they say he wasn't able to be reached for comment, so he doesn't care, right? Portnoy called her, right. He posted the recording of their 12-minute conversation on Twitter. It has racked up over 21.5 million views in less than 24 hours. Let's get the summary here, because I think we're not going to do a full 12-minute call. "I'm sorry, who are you?" Heil asks before insisting, "I have not said anything like that." Portnoy then confronts Heil with an email he obtained that she apparently sent to one identified sponsor of the inaugural One Bite Pizza Festival. That is his event. "We are planning to write about the festival and how some of the sponsors and participants have drawn criticism from whom? Washington Post. You?" Yes. Spoiler alert. It's them. "Have drawn criticism by seeming to associate themselves with Dave Portnoy, who has a history of misogynistic comments and other problematic behavior." Portnoy read to her. Amazing. Absolutely amazing. Dave Portnoy is hilarious, if nothing else. He also posted the email on Barstool's website with the name of the sponsor redacted. The event's partners include Hard Seltzer, High Noon, C4 Energy, Coca-Cola, and 47, among others. Portnoy, who recently reacquired Barstool Sports from Penn Entertainment for $1, which is amazing businessmanship, called Heil's message tortious interference, referring to intentional damage to his professional relationship with a third party to cause economic harm. That sounds like the foundation of a lawsuit, and I hope he pushes it through. He was also furious that the reporter had not reached out to him directly. Of course they wouldn't. They're cowards. Heil contended that she planned to contact Portnoy on Thursday morning, but hadn't yet because she hadn't come up with specific questions for the Barstool boss. Well, you seem to have specific questions for his advertisers, so why not specific questions for him? She's a liar. She's a coward. She's a liar. Bad person. Basically, a journalist. What are you going to do? Anybody who listens to this to think that you are going to give me a fair chance when you're leading our sponsors before you talk to me is crazy, Portnoy retorted, claiming Heil's upcoming hit piece would surely include all this stuff you're about to make up against me. Yeah, it sounds like she's operating from a real unbiased position, doesn't it? The Washington Post, which is wildly left-leaning publication, you have things you've said. You hate Trump, you hate Elon Musk. Not that I'm those people to think you're going to give me a fair shake. I wasn't born yesterday, he added. Good for him. By the end of the call, the two agreed to speak at 10 a.m. Thursday. However, late Wednesday, Portnoy tweeted that the call was canceled and the paper proposed 5 p.m. instead. "I said 10 a.m. or nothing. They refused," he added. The Post has sought comment from Heil, the Washington Post, and Portnoy. And by the Post, of course, we mean the New York Post, which is the site we're reading, not the Washington Post, which is a site I will never grace with my appearance. The 46-year-old internet celebrity has faced accusations from several women of sexual misconduct and rough sex that turned humiliating. Oh no. Well, maybe you shouldn't be sleeping around. But I digress. We already went over this with Russell Brand. But Portnoy strongly denied the claims, as the Post previously reported. 3 other women told Business Insider that Portnoy filmed their encounters without permission. He sued the publication this year, but eventually dropped his case. And this is his tweet. The Washington Post just canceled the 10 a.m. call. Shocker, they proposed 5 p.m. and said, I said 10 a.m. or nothing. They refused. What could suddenly be more important than this? The article has to come out Friday. So they leave themselves a few hours before going to print. And then he has, for some reason, raccoon emojis, which I love. Very interesting. And now I'm curious about the article itself, since it was supposed to come out today. The inaugural One Bite. Oh my gosh, I hate this so much. I don't like the New York Post site setup. Really don't. Andy could definitely do a better job. The inaugural One Bite Pizza Festival, born out of Portnoy's popular One Bite pizza reviews that he shares on YouTube, is 95% sold out according to its website. This is a great opportunity for advertisers. Some all-inclusive tickets are still available for $219.99, and VIP tickets are going for $699.99 for the event, which will be held at Maimonides Park in Brooklyn. Let's see. We have more news about this piece. Washington. Can't spell. Post. Dave. Portnoy. This is quite the interesting story. Oh, yeah. Okay, so here's a piece. You guys want to see if it's a hit piece? Let's see. Pizzerias navigate buzz backlash around Dave Portnoy's Pizza Festival. Washington Post, is there backlash around the Pizza Festival? Who do you think could have possibly caused this so-called backlash? I am sure that you do not have any idea. Let's read what they have to say without paying them any money. I hate them so much. Yeah, this is by Tim Carmen and Emily Heil. Some don't agree with the Barstool Sports founder's statements, but they like what he does for the business. Okay, fair enough. The main thing Maggie DeMarco Miles knew about Barstool Sports founder Dave Portnoy before she agreed to take part in his One Bite Pizza Festival this week in New York was that he had given her father's pizzeria a stellar review in 2018, years before the legendary Domenico DeMarco died. Portnoy, in fact, rated 2 slices from Di Faro Pizza. He gave them both 9.4 out of 10. Oh my. When he first started the One Bite thing, people kept sending me links telling me you got the highest score, and I would listen to it and be like, who is this guy? All he does is curse. That's fair. He does curse a lot. So that was my first impression, DeMarco Miles said in an interview with the Washington Post. I'm sure they didn't mislead her at all. Since signing on for the inaugural One Bite Pizza Festival, named after the influential video series in which Portnoy takes one bite, though usually more, of a slice and gives it a numerical rating, DeMarco Miles has learned a lot more about the man who goes by the nickname El Presidente. How did she learn about him, Washington Post? Did you tell her about him? Did you lead her about him? That's a good question. I think you should answer. For the festival, Di Fara had a special t-shirt made, which the pizzeria put on its Instagram account. That sounds great. This sounds like a wonderful event. DeMarco Miles and the pizzeria were quickly accused of supporting a man who had been accused of sexual misconduct and has a history of using racist, misogynistic, homophobic language that he has defended as jokes. Oh my gosh. The absolute state of the mainstream media is actually nauseating. I don't know if we're going to make it through this full article. This is pretty much as bad as Dave was thinking. Let's see what they conclude. Oh my gosh, it's so freaking long. And it took 2 people to write this. Piece of work. What a garbage publication. I hate them so much. Tim Carmen is a food reporter at the Washington Post, where he's worked since 2010. Previously, he served for 5 years as a food editor and columnist at Washington City Paper. Emily Heil, no relation I'm sure, is a reporter covering national food news and trends. Previously, she co-authored the Reliable Sources column for the Post. Let's see. Larry Nicholson, owner of MPM Food Equipment Group, has a similar take. He's providing 15 electric ovens and says the reason to participate came down to one word: sales. We have no relationship with Portnoy, he said. We're trying to capture the business of the pizzerias that will be there. That's our whole idea behind the festival, not anything to do with One Bite and Portnoy. He says he personally isn't a fan of Portnoy's bad reviews. I don't like that he goes into a place and he can tank it if he gives it a bad review, but I'm just trying to do what we're trying to do, which is sell pizza ovens. So I'm sure the Washington Post is shocked to discover that most of the people who are advertising for this event are doing it for money. I don't know if they know how advertising works. Shocking, I'm sure. But I am really glad that Dave Portnoy called him out on this stuff, and real curious if he goes on to pursue any kind of legal action against them. I hope he does. I hope he destroys them. I hope he rolls them up and smokes them, because they are honestly revolting. So, with that in mind, you guys know what I think about the Washington Post. Let's end on a positive note. This is also from the New York Post, for my sins. And this is an opinion from Josh Hawley, who is the senator from Missouri. Cap credit card interest rates to help Americans hammered by Bidenomics. Exploiting people through high interest rates is wrong. In a world of Wall Street excess, that simple idea now sounds foreign. But for thousands of years, it was basic fairness. Thou shalt not lend upon usury to thy brother, declares Deuteronomy 23:19. That's right, that is in the Bible. The Western world took that principle to heart. From the Roman Empire on, nations enforced usury laws that severely restricted interest rates on loans. To name just one example, colonial Massachusetts capped interest rates for decades at 6%. Times have changed. Our leaders forgot why those laws existed in the first place. They forgot the wisdom of Abraham Lincoln and Theodore Roosevelt, that while workers and capital each have their rights, one should not be privileged above the other. Instead, they went all in for capital and handed our financial system over to big business and big banks, let's be real. Now we reap a bitter harvest. Credit card interest rates are at record levels. Annual percentage rates have soared, with some going as high as 36%. The average is 24.45%. That compares with the average of less than 12% a decade ago. Wow, it really has changed a lot. The total amount of credit card debt is more than $1 trillion, the highest in history, and that is at least partly because of, yes, you guessed it, Bidenomics. Delinquent payment rates are at their highest level in a decade. Compounding the problem, President Joe Biden's inflationary policies have pushed consumer prices to the stratosphere. They kicked off a vicious cycle. As costs rise, Americans are forced to use their credit cards to cover basic necessities like rent and groceries. In a flailing attempt to tackle the issue, the Federal Reserve has raised interest rates higher and higher. Banks pass those costs along to consumers. American households get the short straw. Not only are they paying more for basic necessities, they are now paying to clean up the Biden administration's financial mess. Surprising no one. This burden falls heavily on the nearly 50% of Americans carrying a credit card balance, many struggling to make ends meet. Interest rates this high make it impossible for working people to catch up. And after a while, the biggest multinational banks pull in record profits. Yes, almost like that was the point all along. And all the while, right, yeah, of course, individual financial responsibility matters, but life happens. And that's something I wish that more conservatives would understand. A lot of times when people struggle like this, the conservative response is just, well, you should have been more careful. Life happens, guys. Emergencies happen, and we know that people don't have a lot of money in savings for a reason, okay? Times are tough, and conservatives are not really on board with people going to college, which means that they're okay with them earning less money at their jobs. What do they want people to do? Work 3 different jobs? Sure, you need to be careful. If you run into an issue with your car that you cannot afford to pay out of your bank account, you're going to put it on the credit card. That's a thing that happens. It's okay. It should be okay. But it also shouldn't be an issue. We should have more in savings. I agree. At the end of the day, we can't all agree that life does happen. I like that Josh wrote it this way, even though it's kind of weird. Just this year, Tyson Food announced chicken plant closures in small-town Missouri that will force 2,000 people out of work. Those workers and their families still need to live. If they end up carrying a credit card balance, why are they fair game for corporate plunder? As a nation, we can do better than that. Let's start by capping credit card APRs at 18%. By historical standards, that's quite high, but it's the same APR cap that exists for credit cards issued by federally chartered credit unions. We already have federal laws capping rates for a subset of credit cards, so let's just expand that framework to cover the sector. I think it's a good idea. You guys let me know if you think that's a bad idea. Republicans talking about helping working people is a good thing, but it's more important for us to get the job done. Supporting America's workers and families means tackling the everyday problems they face, not giving handouts to corporations or foreign governments and hoping the benefits will eventually trickle down. I agree with that. Old slogans about the magic of the market won't cut it anymore. Actually passing a law to cap interest rates is a first step toward a better future, a future rooted in our own tradition. American workers and families deserve it. I completely agree with this. Mr. Proxy says, Lid's just trying to distract us. No, I'm not. I think this is very, very relevant because the economy is so bad right now and because I keep trying to hammer home. I don't think anyone's listening, but we really, really do need to win in 2024, which means we need a candidate who can win in a landslide. I personally don't think that's Trump, but I could be wrong. I just want the Democrats out of power. That's like my number one thing, especially with a kid on the way. So we'll see what happens. I'm glad that Josh Hawley is taking a practical step to try to make this happen. I view that as a very positive thing, and I hope that other Republicans take the same kinds of steps. Oh, let's see. Jared says, Lydia, are you going to talk about the New Jersey Democrat senator and his wife who were just indicted on bribery and corruption charges? Bob Menendez, historically, has been the most corrupt figure, one of the most corrupt Democrats that no one ever talks about, which has always been really interesting to me. He actually was caught entangled with underage prostitution some time ago, and I was kind of surprised that nothing happened to him because of it. I think that he right now is being punished as a form of a distraction from something else, and I'm not exactly sure what. But I haven't fully formed an opinion on him yet because that news is still coming out. So we'll see if anything interesting happens over the course of the weekend or if we have any breaking news on Monday. All right, you guys, I'm going to end it here. I'm very out of breath. It's very dark. I'm sure Andy wants to skate. I will see all of you guys on Monday. I'm trying to think if there's anything else I wanted to say. Nope, I think we're good. Stay safe, stay well, stay out of Target. Until next time, bye guys.
How's it going?